Ever get stuck on those philosophical brain twisters? The kind, it seems simple at first, but then, whoa, they just keep unfolding the more you think about them.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, for a mind like yours, always digging into those deep questions, I think Heraclitus is someone you'd appreciate.
Absolutely.
This guy was way back around 500 BCE, and his ideas, well, they still pack a punch even today.
For sure. What gets me about Heraclitus is how he tackles these huge existential questions, like what's existence all about? And it's wild how relevant that still feels, even with just those fragments we have. It's like piecing together a puzzle.
Exactly. And speaking of puzzles, those fragments are, well, they're like little philosophical riddles. They're not straightforward arguments. They're these dense, impactful sayings that really force you to think. And that's what we're diving into today, the heart of Heraclitus's thought.
Sounds good.
We'll be using the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy as our guide, kind of our anchor for this deep dive, exploring his big ideas, the famous concept of universal flux, the unity of opposites. That one's a real head scratcher. And the role of fire as something fundamental.
Right. It is challenging material, even figuring out what he actually meant.
No kidding, it's like deciphering an ancient code. But that's part of the appeal, right? For someone who loves philosophy, that challenge is part of the reward.
Definitely. We're not dealing with simple, easy to follow arguments. It's like we're engaging with a thinker who chose to be obscure.
He did have a knack for that.
Yeah, his style, it really demands interpretation.
Like he wanted to make us work for it.
Exactly. So in this deep dive, we'll look at his approach, his understanding of the cosmos, how he saw knowledge and value, and even the surprising influence he's had over centuries.
It's amazing how his ideas have echoed through time.
Yeah. And all of this, of course, we'll do with our philosopher's hat on, looking at it all through a philosophical lens.
Okay, so let's start with the man himself, Heraclitus. Now, when it comes to biography, the details are they're more like whispers and legends, almost as if they were shaped by his philosophical ideas.
Oh, you hit the nail on the head there. Much of what we think we know comes from Diogenes Laertius, but as that Stanford entry points out, lots of those stories probably came about to showcase what kind of thinker he was. Unconventional, challenging, a bit of a rebel. We know he came from Ephesus, which was a major city in Ionia back then under Persian influence.
Ionia, that's in present-day Turkey, right?
That's right.
Okay, got it.
And there's that interesting bit about him supposedly inheriting some fancy title, maybe even a symbolic kingship of the Ionians, which he then passed on to his brother.
Really?
Yeah. And that, along with other clues, might suggest he preferred aristocratic rule.
Interesting. So, geographically, he was near Miletus, where those early Ionian philosophers like Sales and Anaximander were from.
Right. But there's no evidence of a direct teacher-student link, at least not that we know of. Seems like he carved his own intellectual path, maybe even deliberately going against those established schools of thought.
He was definitely a free thinker.
A real maverick, and that's why he's often seen as this solitary figure, hard to categorize into those neat philosophical boxes.
Yeah, those labels never quite fit.
And he even claimed to be self-taught, which really emphasizes his independent spirit and his, well, pretty sharp criticism of others.
Yeah, he didn't hold back.
He really took aim at the big names of his time. No one was spared. Homer, Hesiod, Pythagoras, even the Milesians got a taste of his critique.
He called Pythagoras a charlatan and basically dismissed the epic poets.
That's some serious philosophical shade throwing.
He didn't mince words. It really shows how much he valued deep insight over just knowing a lot of facts. He rejected what the Greeks called plumathia, that idea that being well-read means you truly understand things.
That's so relevant even today. Just because you can Google something doesn't mean you actually grasp it. Right. But interestingly, even though he was critical, there's a shift in his work, a focus on human affairs that's new.
Oh, like a humanistic turn.
In a way, yes. But he wasn't exactly a fan of humanity.
Yeah, he was known for being a bit, well, elitist.
He definitely thought most people weren't capable of understanding his ideas. That comes up a lot, this idea that only a few can really get it. And that might explain his unique, some might say difficult, writing style.
It's true, his writing isn't exactly easy reading.
Right. We have accounts of a single book, most likely a papyrus scroll, that he left in the Temple of Artemis, but its structure is still debated.
It's like trying to put together a jigsaw puzzle with missing pieces.
Was it a continuous argument or more a collection of these dense sayings? What we have left suggests the latter. Maybe something like oracular pronouncements, not a systematic treatise.
Makes sense. Those fragments do have that cryptic, almost prophetic quality.
Right. And Theophrastus, a later philosopher, thought it felt disjointed, kind of unfinished. And then Diogenes Laertius mentions a later division into sections, like on cosmology, politics and ethics, and theology.
Oh, interesting. Those themes definitely weave through the fragments, all kind of interconnected.
Yeah. And that points to Heraclitus's vision, this deep unity between the natural world, society, and the divine.
It's all linked.
Exactly. But what's really striking about his style is what scholars call as linguistic density and resonance. It's like he packs so much meaning into single words and short phrases, and eBay one triggers a whole web of related ideas.
It's like every word is a loaded gun.
Exactly. And it makes you think, doesn't it? Take that fragment, for instance, about deaths gaining greater portions.
That one's a bit morbid.
Well, it is about death, but look at how he uses language. The alliteration, that mirroring grammatical structure, it's almost like poetry, linking these seemingly opposite ideas of life and death.
You have to really chew on it to get the full flavor.
Exactly. And then there's that short but profound statement. The character of man is his guardian spirit. That middle term, it can connect to either character or guardian spirit, creating this powerful link between our choices and our fate. It's like he's saying our ethical decisions determine our destiny, which really forces you to engage with it on different levels.
It's deep stuff, no doubt.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, let's dive into some of his core philosophical principles, starting with the one everyone knows, flux. You can't step into the same river twice.
Yeah.
We've all heard that, right?
Sure have.
But it turns out that specific phrasing might not be straight from Heraclitus. It could actually be Plato's interpretation.
Oh, interesting. You've got to be careful with those interpretations.
Exactly. In his dialogue Cratylus, Plato attributes that river analogy to Heraclitus. But when you look at the actual river fragments, they're labeled B12, B49a, and B91a, only B12, has that unmistakable Heraclitus style, that density, the ambiguity, the wordplay. It's like a fingerprint. Yeah.
Exactly. Now, fragment B12 reads, on those stepping into rivers staying the same, other and other waters flow. That's quite a mouthful, and it's way different from what Plato presents.
It is. It's more layered, less straightforward.
Right, and that ambiguity is key. Does the same refer to the rivers or the people stepping in? Both readings work, and that might be intentional, but the connection, the core of it, is between those seemingly constant same rivers and the ever-changing other waters. It's like a statement about the unity of opposites baked right in. A river stays a river because its water is in constant motion.
If it stopped flowing, it wouldn't be a river anymore.
Exactly.
Like a paradox, it's constant because it's changing.
He was full of those.
It's smart.
And think about it, it's like a living thing, a human body. It stays the same body over time, but its cells are constantly being replaced.
It's mind-blowing when you really stop and think about it.
Identity through change? That's Heraclitus in a nutshell. And get this, that alternative reading, where the people stepping in stay the same even though the water's different. That adds another layer, suggesting our encounters with change shape our sense of self.
Wow, so we're shaped by the flow of life, literally.
In a way, yes.
Fascinating. Okay, so those other fragments, B49 and B91a, those sound more like Plato's version where you can't step into the same river twice.
You got it. And there's even that extreme take from Cratylus, who followed Heraclitus, saying you can't even step in once because everything is changing so fast.
Wow, that's even more radical.
Right. As scholar Markovich points out, you can see how those later interpretations, maybe even misinterpretations, came from a less nuanced reading of B12.
So it's more about how change is needed for things to keep their identity, not just that everything is dissolving into chaos.
You nailed it. It's not about things falling apart. It's about how constancy and change are intertwined, both necessary for reality.
That really flips the script on how we usually think about things.
And that leads perfectly into the next big idea, the unity of opposites. It's like flux is just one part of this bigger idea that things that seem contradictory can actually be connected, even the same, depending on how you look at it.
Yeah, that one's a real head-scratcher.
It is, but it's important to remember Heraclitus isn't saying everything is simultaneously its opposite in the same way.
Okay, so there's nuance here.
Definitely.
Yeah.
His thinking is much more subtle than that. Look at fragment B61. Sea is the purest and most polluted water. For fish, drinkable and healthy. For men, undrinkable and harmful.
Right, context matters. It's not just that water is both pure and polluted at the same time.
You get it. The point is that qualities can be relative. They depend on context.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Like beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
Exactly.
Or that saying about one man's trash being another man's treasure.
Right, and some critics, like Barnes, they've said Heraclitus just drops qualifiers, like he doesn't understand the logic, but this fragment shows he does get it. And then there's B10 about collections, wholes and not wholes, brought together and pulled apart. Again, it's about how statements that seem opposite can actually be true, but in different senses, from different perspectives.
So it's all about perspective.
To a large extent, yes.
Okay, so let's talk about fragment B88, the one that seems to really get at this idea of the unity of opposites. It says, as the same thing in us are living and dead, waking and sleeping, young and old, for these things having changed around are those, and those in turn having changed around are these.
Ah, that's a good one.
Like a poem, almost.
It is beautiful, isn't it? And it shows how opposites can be seen as the same thing because of change. We're alive now, but we'll die. We're awake, but we sleep. We're young, but we'll age. It's not that these things are identical at the same time. They're different states within a cycle of transformation.
So they're connected by change, not by being the same in every way.
Precisely. Heraclitus isn't trying to break the rules of logic. He's analyzing how these seemingly opposed things are actually parts of the same process, the same systems.
It's like he's seeing the connections beneath the surface.
Exactly.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit and talk about ontology, the study of being.
Okay.
The traditional view, going back to Aristotle, is that Heraclitus was a material monist, meaning he believed everything comes from one fundamental substance. And that substance, according to this view, is fire.
Right, the arch, the first principle.
Exactly. But the Stanford entry, it throws a wrench in that interpretation.
Oh, how so?
Well, it points out that some of Heraclitus' own statements don't quite fit. Take fragment B36, for example. For souls, it is death to become water. For water, death to become earth. But from earth, water is born, and from water, soul. That sounds more like radical transformation than just subtle changes in fire.
Death and birth, those are strong words. It suggests things actually change into something else completely, not just variations of fire.
Right, so how can he be a monist if the fundamental substance keeps changing into something else entirely? It's like a paradox.
It is. It's hard to reconcile those ideas. Either the changes are just appearances, or maybe Heraclitus wasn't a monist in that strict traditional sense.
So maybe fire isn't a static thing, but more a symbol of change itself.
That's a great point. Think about how the ancients saw fire. It's dynamic, it needs fuel to keep going. It's more about process than permanence.
Maybe for Heraclitus, the process of change was the ultimate reality, not some unchanging substance.
Now that's a thought-provoking idea.
Let's move on to his cosmology, his view of the universe. Fragment B30 is a key one here. This world order cosmos, the same of all, no god nor man did create, but it ever was and is and will be. Ever-living fire, kindling in measures and being quenched in measures. That's a pretty powerful statement about the nature and origin of the cosmos, wouldn't you say?
It really is. And it's the first time we see the word cosmos used to mean world order or universe. He identifies it with this ever-living fire. But importantly, it's a fire that operates according to measures, a balance in how it kindles and goes out.
It's not just random, it's regulated.
Right.
Okay, but what about those later interpretations, like the Stoics and Aristotle? They saw the cosmos as going through cycles of destruction and rebirth through fire.
It seems Heraclitus is saying something different. He's suggesting a continuous process where the overall order stays the same, even though the individual parts are always changing and shifting.
Like the river again, its form stays consistent, but the water is always moving.
Exactly. And then we have those descriptions of elemental transformations in fragments B31A and B. Fire turns into sea, then half the sea becomes earth, and the other half a fire burst. Then earth liquefies back into sea. It's cyclical, governed by some kind of law, like a conservation of matter.
The amount of stuck stays the same, even though it changes form.
You got it. There's this sense of balance and equilibrium. It's not random change, but a regulated process.
And out of that, the cosmos emerges.
Precisely.
Okay, now for a more intense concept. War. Heraclitus had a lot to say about war and strife, and it's not exactly peaceful stuff.
True. Fragment B53 is pretty clear. War is father of all and king of all.
Not exactly a hallmark sentiment.
No, not at all. It goes against so many other ancient thinkers who are all about harmony and peace.
He was definitely a contrarian.
Absolutely. But for him, this tension, this conflict, it's essential. It's what makes the world so diverse and dynamic. Without it, things would be stagnant, boring.
So no conflict, no progress.
You could put it that way. He even redefines justice not as the absence of conflict, but as the pattern, the underlying law of that struggle between opposites.
Interesting. Like yin and yang, those opposing forces that create balance.
A good analogy.
And then there's that guiding principle he talks about, symbolized by the thunderbolt.
Yes, in fragment B64.
And he links it to Zeus, but not in the traditional way. Fragment B32 says, one being, the only wise one, would and would not be called by the name of Zeus. That's cryptic, even for Heraclitus.
It is. It's like he's pointing to a divine power that's behind this constant flux and strife, something bigger than our usual idea of gods.
A cosmic intelligence, maybe?
Perhaps. And it's interesting how he connects this power with the transformative force of fire and the thunderbolt, that symbol of sudden dramatic change.
And it's not just abstract philosophy. He was also interested in actual natural phenomena. Like he had theories about the lunar cycle and saw the sun and moon as bowls of fire.
Right. He was an observer of the natural world, too.
So he was grounded in reality, in a way.
Definitely. And even in his more theological statements, like in fragment B67, where he says, God is day-night, winter-summer, war, peace, satiety, hunger, he's still emphasizing this unity underlying apparent opposites.
All connected.
Exactly.
And then there's that idea in fragment B102. To God, all things are fair, good, and just. But men suppose some things are unjust, some just. That's a radical perspective on morality and justice, don't you think?
It is. He's not trying to explain away evil. He's shifting our perspective to a larger view, where even conflict and suffering have their place in the cosmic order.
That's like he's saying we're too focused on the small picture.
Right.
Okay, now let's get into knowledge. Plato famously argued that with all this flux, true knowledge is impossible. But did Heraclitus agree?
That's a great question.
The Stanford entries suggest he might not have.
Interesting. It seems like he did believe true wisdom was rare, not something everyone, even those considered wise, achieved.
Like in fragment B28a.
Right. But he doesn't completely shut down the possibility of knowledge. In fact, he seems to value sensory experience, at least to some extent.
That makes sense. He was observing the world.
He was. In fragment B55, he says, the things of which there is sight, hearing, experience, I prefer. And in B101a, he notes that the eyes are more accurate witnesses than the ears.
He was a fan of first-hand experience.
He was.
But it's clear he didn't think just gathering information or memorizing what others said was enough for real understanding.
Oh, definitely not. In B40, he goes after Hesiod, Pythagoras, Xenophanes, and Heraclitus for knowing a lot but lacking true insight.
So information overload doesn't equal wisdom.
Exactly.
We see that all the time today.
Right. And in B104, he criticizes the masses for following popular bards, saying, the many are base while the few are noble. And then in B57, he criticizes Hesiod for not understanding the unity of day and night. Again, it's about missing the deeper connections.
It's about seeing the patterns, not just the individual pieces.
Exactly.
And then those fragments about the deaf who hear the logos but don't understand, B34. And the eyes and ears being bad witnesses for barbarian soul, P107. They emphasize that it's not just about passively taking in the world, we have to actively interpret it.
Make sense of it.
Right. But then there's this hopeful bit in fragment B116. All men have a share in self-knowledge and sound thinking. It's like he's saying we all have the potential. It's just about tapping into it.
And that brings us back to his style, all those riddles and paradoxes. It's like he's trying to make us think harder.
He's not making it easy for us.
No, he's not. His logoi are puzzles to be solved, not just things to be understood passively.
Like a mental workout.
Exactly.
And his method, using concrete examples like a river or a bow, to suggest bigger principles, it's more like induction, challenging our assumptions rather than just using logic.
Right, like that analogy of the Delphic oracle in fragment B93. Neither reveals nor conceals, but gives a sign.
Ooh, that's a good one.
It perfectly captures his approach. He's not giving us answers, he's giving us clues, making us work for it.
He wants us to discover the truth for ourselves.
Exactly.
Okay, let's wrap up with a quick look at his views on value. It seems like the goal of his philosophy was to help us understand the world and our place in it.
That was the big picture.
And that leads to sound thinking, which he saw as the greatest virtue, according to fragment B112.
Right, knowing the logos.
Right. He also had some more practical advice, like the importance of moderation, self-control, even the pursuit of fame for those who are truly virtuous.
Right, like in B29.
Yeah. And there are hints about an afterlife, maybe with rewards and punishments, though that's still debated by scholars.
It is.
As for politics, he definitely favored rule by the wise few, not the many. Remember that famous line, "One good man is worth 10,000."
From B49, yes.
And he criticized his fellow Ephesians for banishing Hermodorus, who he saw as a just man.
Fragment B121.
Right. And in B114, he says, all human laws are nourished by the one divine law. That ties back into his cosmology, this idea of a universal order governing everything.
Yes, it does.
Now let's talk about his influence. It's amazing how far his ideas spread, even though he didn't have a formal school or disciples in the traditional sense.
It's true. He seems to have inspired Parmenides to develop his philosophy of unchanging being, though their ideas might have more in common than we think.
Opposites attract.
Maybe in this case.
And then there's Empedocles, who echoed some of his themes about flux and the interplay of opposing forces. Even some of those Hippocratic medical writers used his language and concepts.
His ideas were in the air.
Right. And that contrast, Heraclitus, the philosopher of change, versus Parmenides, the philosopher of spaces, that became a classic debate in Western thought.
A foundational one, you could say.
Absolutely. And Plato, he definitely engaged with Heraclitus's ideas, especially through Cratylus, using them to describe the ever-changing world of the senses.
Right, though he and Aristotle criticized him for seeming to contradict basic logic, but even Aristotle tried to categorize him as a material monist, albeit a unique one with that dynamic fire substance.
Making sense of Heraclitus is no easy task.
Definitely not.
And then the Stoics, they drew a lot from his physics, especially his focus on fire as a guiding principle.
Yeah.
And in Epictetus, he saw Heraclitus as a sort of proto-skeptic because of his ideas about the limits of our senses.
His influence is all over the place.
It's remarkable how one thinker with such an unusual style could have such a huge impact.
It's a testament to the depth and complexity of his ideas that he's been interpreted in so many different ways.
It's like he left us a philosophical puzzle that people are still trying to solve.
That's a great way to put it.
And his legacy as the philosopher of Flux, that cemented his place in the history of thought.
Absolutely. He's a key figure in process philosophy, and his influence extends even beyond philosophy into fields like psychology and organizational theory.
So to sum it all up for you, our philosophy-loving listener, we've taken a deep dive into the world of Heraclitus.
We sure have.
We've explored how, through his cryptic fragments, he presented a reality defined by constant change, where things stay the same precisely because they're in flux.
A paradox, but a profound one.
Exactly. We looked at his concept of the unity of opposites, not as embracing contradictions, but as recognizing the deep links between things that seem opposed.
Two sides of the same coin.
Right.
How change connects them.
We even wrestled with his ontology, questioning whether fire was really a static substance or more a symbol of change itself.
That was a good discussion.
It was. And we delved into his cosmology, driven by the interplay of opposing forces, and his ideas about knowledge, where true understanding comes from actively interpreting the logos of the world.
He really makes you think.
He does. And we touched on his ethics, his politics, and the amazing reach of his influence.
A legacy that spans millennia.
Exactly. So for you, our listener, who's always eager to explore these big questions, engaging with Heraclitus is a must.
Oh, definitely.
His fragments challenge us to think about change and identity, the limits of knowledge, and the nature of reality itself. They're like little philosophical bombs that keep exploding with new insights.
They really do, and they're still relevant today, even after all these years.
Absolutely. And on that note, here's a final thought to ponder. Given Heraclitus' emphasis on change as the foundation of stability, could we look at the evolution of philosophical concepts in the same way?
That's an interesting thought.
Is the constant debate and reinterpretation in philosophy a sign of weakness or a necessary part of getting closer to truth?
Almost like that ever-flowing river, always changing, but always a river.
Exactly. So we encourage you to keep exploring Heraclitus' fragments, to dive into the scholarship around him and see what resonates with you.
There's a whole world of ideas waiting to be discovered.
And who knows, maybe you'll even find your own interpretation of this ancient thinker's wisdom.
That's the beauty of philosophy. It's an ongoing conversation.